Hello, I'm Mark Ainley from the Piano Files, and I'm delighted to be sharing this upload that includes the only known moving images, silent film footage of the great pianist Dinu Lipatti. These few seconds of precious footage were discovered by Lipatti researcher Orlando Murrin in the collection of Ursula Jones, whose father, Walter Strebi, was one of the founding members of the Lucerne Music Festival, and who filmed a number of the illustrious musicians who used to visit the family home and play in the festival. This footage was discovered in 2017, just in time for Lipatti's birth centenary, and it hasn't been made public yet because there were the hopes that this footage could form the basis of a documentary, a full-length feature documentary about Lipatti, which has never been produced in English. And in fact, the reason that Lipatti was not included in the wonderful documentary, The Art of Piano, is because there were no moving images of him. And so once the discovery took place, Orlando and I communicated, and I made some significant attempts at getting a documentary produced, and we collaborated on this and found a production team, and they found producers who were looking to, who were interested in producing it, and then COVID hit. And so unfortunately, over the course of the remaining couple of years, everything fell through, and we just decided that it was time to make this public. And of course, a documentary could still happen and really should still happen, because there is now more and more that's been discovered thanks to Orlando and my efforts and the efforts of our colleagues in Romania and other great researchers who have uncovered new recordings, photographs, documents, and so on and so forth. So we are now making this incredible footage public. And as a preamble, I have a filmed conversation both with Orlando Murrin and Ursula Jones, sharing some background into the footage, the pianist, and so on, that I think will be very fascinating for viewers who are interested in this great musician. And then there's a beautiful montage that Orlando has made of this incredible footage, including other great musicians appearing in Lucerne. So stay tuned for what I think will be quite a revealing look at the great pianist, Dinu Lipatti. I am delighted, Orlando Murrin, that you're able to join me today and to share some of the discoveries of your research into the pianist you and I are both fascinated with, Dinu Lipatti. How is it that you became interested in Lipatti, and why did you want to start doing some research into him?
I heard about him when I was a schoolboy. I think a lot of people were taught by their music teachers at that period, which was 1970s, I guess, that there was this legendary pianist, this amazing pianist who had had a short but stellar career and was simply the greatest pianist that they could introduce us to. So we did listen to lots of records, and I don't think I really appreciated them at that time, but I was introduced to the music, and particularly the Chopin waltzes, perhaps. And so I came back to them throughout my life. I'm a keen amateur pianist, but I listened a lot to music. And I kind of came to agree that my music teachers were absolutely correct. He was, for me, the perfect pianist. Then about, I think, 6 or 7 years ago, I'm not quite sure what triggered it, but I suddenly got a little bit more interested in his life. I thought I'd like to find out a bit more about this guy with this famously tragic life. And I started to look into the biography, and I found it very, very puzzling. I couldn't put all these clashing components together. There was this dazzling career. There was this wife who seemed a very powerful, intriguing figure. Then I looked further, and there was a mother. Then there was Romania, and then there was Switzerland. Then there was the kind of miracle of the cortisone arriving, which enabled him to do these last recordings, which were the ones that I'd listened to all those years ago. And all this was jangling in my head, and I thought, this is like fiction. And so I tried to find out more and more. I read all the books that I could, and the excellent biography by Grigore Barguanau. Forgive me, Grigore, I've never known how to pronounce your name.
Barguanau.
Thank you, Mark. Say it again for me. I'll really try in future.
Yeah, Barguanau.
Barguanau. Thank you very much.
That's as far as my Romanian goes, maybe. So I don't know that I'm as accurate, but yes.
And then I got more and more interested in the story, and I realized that some people were still alive who heard him play. And then I wanted to go to Romania, and then I wanted to go to Geneva, and I managed to find all the people who were still alive, who had been in some way involved in the story. And people were writing to me. It was very touching. People were writing to me, knowing that there was this crazy Englishman interested in Lipatti, saying, I heard him, I went to a party and I was a young girl and I sat on the floor in someone's drawing room and heard him, and someone else had heard him at a festival. And then I went all shivery because I spent a long time trying to research any member of his wife's family, Madeleine Lipatti, this strange and elusive figure. And I went through all the phone books of Geneva. I really enjoyed the research. I enjoy a bit of detective work, but this was quite new to me, this kind of detective work. And genealogy, I didn't know anything about, but I found the name of the family, and I found a name, and I phoned someone in Switzerland, and no reply. So I wrote to them, and my phone rang on a Sunday morning, and it was the great niece of Madeleine Lipatti. And I actually wept from joy, which was a bit embarrassing. And it turned out that she had, her mother and father had been Madeleine's executor, and they had a huge amount, like literally a huge amount of photographs and letters and documents, which I'd never been through and had no interest in going through. And if I wanted to go and look at them, fine. So obviously that was another expensive trip to Geneva. But I looked through this astonishing number of photographs, which covered, they were great. Well, Madeleine Lipatti was a great hoarder. So she never threw anything away. So there were thousands of photographs of her own family, Dinu's family, and of their time together, and many of them in quintuplicate, which confused things. So it was quite a discovery, and they're wonderful people. They say use whatever you want, and so I went back and we used a lot of them in a book. So that was tremendously exciting. And I also met the daughter of Dinu's doctor, the wonderful Dubois-Ferrière, who was a rather wonderful woman. I think even she would regard herself as unusual, and very passionate about Dinu. I think she felt that she had a kind of almost telepathic connection with him, and she felt that she was to some extent the kind of curator of his reputation. Whereas I think there are a lot of musicologists who know more about him than she did, but no one could have cared more about him. She died, unfortunately, last year, and we have yet to see what documents there are in her collection, but they're being well cared for.
I mean, something that I think you and I have both experienced in our research is how one person leads to another, and you make this one phone call, you write this one letter, and then all of a sudden this entire other world opens up. And there's these things that are kept in basements and attics, and these private collections. And we tried the institutional route, and there's some stuff there, but then you just find all of a sudden these treasures that are lurking in somebody's home in a shoebox, and it's absolutely astonishing. And that there is, as you say, with the late Dominique Papon, there's this incredible affinity and respect and care that's there, this passion to preserve and to safeguard the legacy of this artist who is so internationally beloved. I think more so than the Romanians necessarily understand. This wonderful book that you and I contributed to with photographs and documents and so on, that currently is only available in Romania, and I'm sure international music lovers would absolutely love to get their hands on it, because there's tons of wonderful stuff in there. But I started in this lark in the late 80s, when I was in my late teens, and did what I could then in the pre-internet day. And it was similar with, going through phone books, although I often had to phone up embassies and get them to go through the phone book for me. But when you came on the scene and you wrote to me so graciously saying, I hope I'm not stepping on your toes, I was so grateful that somebody else had this new passion, because you followed avenues that I think some of us who had been doing this for a while hadn't. So you discovered these incredible photos, this the great niece or whoever it is of Madeleine's, that Mr. Bargoano and I we'd never seen any of these documents. So for that, I think we're all, and all the Lipatti fans are eternally grateful. What I started discovering, especially once I got into the EMI archives in 1991, there was, there's the known story, and then there's actually what really happened. There's this legend, and then there's the humanity and what was really happening. And I think you've uncovered a lot of that in the personal side of what was happening in his life. I uncovered the fact that, a lot of the myths we'd been told were exactly that, myth. And, truth is stranger than fiction. There is so much that was extraordinary about his life and about his music making. And yet there was so much that was exaggerated and that wasn't true, that really didn't need to be, that piece around him needing 3 years to prepare the Tchaikovsky concerto, which is nonsense. And, when I was there at age 21, holding this memo signed by Walter Legge saying, that Lipatti's agreed to record the Tchaikovsky concerto next year, when he was the one who specifically said after Lipatti died that he refused to do it, I couldn't reconcile what we were publicly told, and recognizing that there was actually something else that happened. And I think his life was so extraordinary, and you've uncovered so much around this personal stuff. I'd never known that his mother had been arrested trying to get to Switzerland. She was trying to get to Switzerland to see him?
Yes, yeah. She had the jewelry and silver stolen, hidden in her corsetry, so she went to jail. But I mean, that went to jail. That was nothing compared to the rest of the family kind of died or disappeared. No, absolutely awful. But in Switzerland, there's a good side to it as well, because apart from the terrible things that happened, the enormous generosity of the Swiss and the musical world towards him and his wife was very, very touching. The kindness that people showed, the money, the generosity. I mean, who paid for these clinics month after month after month? Who paid for the cortisone? We know about some generous donors, but they were bankrolled from the moment they arrived in Switzerland. They arrived with nothing, and managed to survive and live in the middle of Geneva. The Swiss come out of it very, very well, I believe.
Indeed. So with all of these photos and letters and all of these discoveries, I mean, the Holy Grail, there's been some recordings that would be the Holy Grail if we could discover them. I'm still looking for that Beethoven Waldstein Sonata.
It's been the BBC's 100th anniversary this month, or the end of last month, I think, and they're asking for everyone to look in their archives for old BBC recordings. And I'm thinking, please, just someone look for the word Waldstein, and just please.
Exactly.
You think it's going to turn up, don't you?
I'm still hopeful, but it's been 35 years, but I'd still like to hold out hope.
It gets longer, doesn't it?
It does.
More and more unlikely, I'm afraid.
But we never know, because, again, who expected that in Brooklyn we were going to find some of these recordings that were, again, in this, private collection, that somebody had got them from Geneva. I mean, it was just incredible. But, the seeing the humanity and more that we're learning about Lipatti, seeing him in photographs that aren't just those posed studio photographs, seeing him in these personal photographs, and then what you've discovered in terms of his life story, and really not just this mythical kind of legendary musical stuff, but the human side to him. In a sense, what's been missing as well has been moving images. And I know that the reason Lipatti wasn't included in the otherwise wonderful documentary, The Art of Piano, in the late 90s, was the fact that there were no moving images of him, whereas there were silent films of a lot of other pianists who were therefore included. And so it's kind of infuriating that there should be film footage of these great pianists at the piano starting in the 1920s, in the 1920s or even before, and that we can see them and we think, well, where's the film of Lipatti? And there hasn't been any until your research led you into a certain direction, and you made quite an astounding discovery. Would you tell us about how and what transpired?
Well, this is what you call luck. This is your actual luck. Obviously, I talked to my friends, knew what I was on about, and anyone who would listen, I would tell them about Dinu Lipatti. And my main profession is as a food writer. And I have some friends who overlap with music the way that I overlap with music. I have one of the best cooks I know, who I've worked with for 20 years, is a woman called Angela Nilsson. And I just happened to mention to her my Lipatti research. And she said, oh, that's really interesting. I've got a musical friend. I must tell him, I bet he'd love to be interested. So her friend, she has a friend called Clive Barger. So Clive Barger, she does indeed, because Angela is diligent. She always does what she says she's going to do. Clive Barger, the word comes back, oh, Clive Barger knows someone who's got a home movie with Lipatti in it. So I thought, oh, great, yeah, sure, sure. So I start off down that route. And then I've also got a friend who's a food writer, who's called Jean Strang, who's married to a gentleman who is one of Thomas Beecham's illegitimate children. So there's a very good musical connection there. So I mentioned to Jean, oh, I'm researching Dinu Lipatti. I knew that she was interested in music. And she said, oh, let me have a think. I've heard that name recently. And then within about a week, both these two people had got back to me to confirm that, yeah, there was someone living in Hamilton Place in London who had some film footage on a home movie of Dinu Lipatti. So I said, okay. So they put me in contact with this woman, who is a wonderful woman called Ursula Jones. And I took the next train up to London. And Ursula, who isn't particularly technically minded, had a stack of CDs, and she had her home movies, and I can imagine a room full of flaky, splintery old bits of celluloid falling to bits there. She'd had someone transfer them onto CDs for her, DVDs for her. That was Eric Singer who did that, who was a musicologist and a very fine musician himself. So he'd transferred them, but there were rather a lot of them. And she said, I know it's somewhere there, somewhere in this lot is Dinu Lipatti. So we started to look and we said, look, awful lot of film here and lots of holidays. I know a lot about Ursula's early life from the holiday films of Venice and Florence and Switzerland, military parades, the lot. And there, quite suddenly, was Dinu. And a few seconds later was Dinu with his wife. And I was absolutely mesmerized. I fell on the floor. So thank you, Angela. Thank you, Clive. Thank you, Jean. And thank you, Ursula, for this incredible discovery. After that,
Eric, it was Eric who transferred them?
It was Eric Singer who transferred them, who had done the transfer. But then they had been there for a couple of years, I imagine. And Ursula had made no secret of them. I think she must have said to people, oh, I've got a nice little film of Dinu Lipatti from my youth. She must have mentioned that for Clive to have heard about it.
Wow.
And for Paul Strang to have heard about it. So after that, this treasured item, I thought, is there only one copy of this, Ursula? Can I take this away and copy it, please? And she was very, very trusting. I took it away, and the first thing I did was copy it in the sky and the cloud everywhere. The copies of of her huge films everywhere. And then after that, I settled down to, with Eric Singer's help, I isolated all the other musicians that I could find in the film. Mm-hmm. And I thought, let's try and make them into a kind of chocolate box of Swiss musicianship of that period, starring Dinu at the beginning and end. And then it made sense to set them to music. There was a lot of fun I couldn't have identified a lot of those people without Eric's help, but there's one moment at which a woman who does look a bit like Clara Haskell comes in and walks across. It isn't Clara Haskell. Now, we were determined it would be Clara Haskell, and I sent it to Allegra Markovic, who is Dinu's goddaughter, and she said to me, "That ain't Clara Haskell, you're wrong." So, and she was of course right. So it isn't, and her father is in it. Her father, the conductor, and very handsome and dashing, and her mother. They make a lovely appearance in it. Her parents.
People who are watching our conversation are going to shortly see the beautiful collage that you've made and get to see this incredible, just these snippets and these seconds of Lipatti moving. And I had the same experience as you with just about falling on the floor, because all of a sudden this being, this iconic individual who we've seen reproduced in so many familiar photographs, all of a sudden there's this human element where it's not posed, it's not constructed. His hair is actually in a little bit out of place in some ways, and then there's, you know, this movement where he brushes his hair in place, and it's just all of a sudden we see this human being interacting.
Because he was very aware. He was a star in his lifetime. He knew it. He was very aware, and there's a lot of studio pictures, and the unofficial ones generally we haven't seen. But to see him natural with his graceful body language, his compact form, his very touching relationship with his wife, who looks beautiful, 9 years older than him, but you wouldn't know it. And his glasses, he took care never to be photographed in his glasses.
I know.
And
only a few
takes the glasses off when he sees that the camera is rolling, I suspect.
I know. So we just see this little bit, like, you know, and I mean, the cover image that we chose, sort of the publicity still that we chose when we announced the film, is just this wonderful one where he has this absolutely marvelous, uninhibited, unfettered smile. And his hair is just a little bit wavier instead of just always, you know, perfectly slicked back. And it just shows the human in a very different way than the artist. And
I loved to see the relationship between him and Madeline, and the kind of care that Madeline, I mean, he was very ill at that point, but he was there, he was out and about. I think it's extremely touching.
It is, and the way the way he leans over to speak to her, and of course, you know, I was kind of thinking, well, you know, it's while musicians are playing, I thought it was kind of a little bit bad for him that, you know, a musician is speaking while other musicians are playing. But it was
while Hindemith's conducting the bassoons.
That's right, and it's so intimate though, like again the body language, as you're saying, and the relationship. You can just see the care, and also when he goes up to Hindemith, and I believe it's to Hindemith, and he shakes his hand. You know, there's just this, in a sense, this deferring, like you can see the respect he has towards Hindemith, and
I've never managed to track down what they were playing. Incidentally, it must have been Hindemith did rearrange his music on request. It's a rearrangement of something that I can't find. If anyone can locate it just by looking at bassoonists playing. I think it was just done for the occasion, and they had a bit of fun. But in the film, just for anyone who's watching it, I show the clip at the beginning, and then we come back to it a little bit more leisurely at the end with the other musicians in between. And the other musicians aren't at the same garden party that Dinu's at, but they're at Lucerne events in the same period. So they might as well have been there, but it's nice to see some of the other individuals as well, isn't it?
Well, there were some. Yeah, well, Carrie Ann, we see in other places in Honegger and so on, but there were some musicians at the same party. I think Furtwängler was at that party, and also Maria Stader.
Maria Stader, yes.
Adrian Eschbacher and a few others.
And we get a few glimpses of Schwarzkopf. Schwarzkopf is there, isn't she?
Yes.
Looking very Schwarzkopf.
I mean, I was fortunate. I had an opportunity to meet her just sort of towards the end before she stopped seeing visitors, and she was very gracious to me back in 1992. But yet, you know, this direct connection, seeing them all together, seeing them moving, seeing them interacting, it was. I think it's absolutely astonishing to be able to see this, and then now we wonder who else has anything. You know, how is it that Swiss television never had any film footage. You know, I just kind of imagine, wouldn't it have been a great news story when he was making those recordings and there was the Columbia truck there at Radio Geneva, that the Swiss television would have reported on it and would have done something.
Well, maybe this will encourage people to rummage in their attics or their basements. That would be a marvelous thing to come from it. Maybe this is only the start, Mark. I would love that to be. But in the meantime, I'm just so thrilled to be able to share it with Lipatti lovers, who I know will enjoy it enormously. And the music that I put behind it is his Concertino, played by him. So I think he would approve of the choice of backing track.
Absolutely. And I just think it's a lovely collage that shows, in a sense, the musical culture and the personal social culture that he was in, with the Strebi family, you know, Ursula's father and parents, really, who welcomed all of these musicians into their home, as Ursula and I discuss in our conversation as well.
What a life she's had. What a life.
In the 2 weeks prior to the conversation she and I had, she was in Africa doing musical, cultural, social, you know, support work there. I mean, she's an absolutely incredible individual. I can't wait to get to London now. You know, I've been so fortunate in the last 30 plus years to meet so many amazing people through this Lipatti research, and she's, you know, yet another phenomenal individual who has done so much in the musical world and just the world overall. It's incredible.
She's adored by brass players. Because she does so much for young brass players. She's a real old-fashioned patron of the arts in the best possible way, in Switzerland as well as in England.
Yeah, amazing. So I'm so grateful that your research and your, you know, just that passion that you had, whereby you spoke to everybody, and that's what led to, you know, this incredible discovery of, oh, there's somebody who has some Lipatti film, where, you know, you and I, it's just we can't possibly imagine, you know, like, what?
Well, next time someone says that to me, I'll believe them rather than saying, no, I think you're mistaken.
So I'm so grateful that we're able to share this now. We'd kept this, just to explain to the public, we'd kept this releasing this footage because we really wanted this to be the foundation of a documentary about Lipatti, and hoped that the existence of this would spur some producers into action. And we made some inquiries. It looked like things were going well, and then COVID happened. And that just kind of scuttled everything. And so at this point, I think after 5 years after your amazing discovery, it's really time for us to share this. And we can still, obviously, make a documentary about Lipatti. I think it's astonishing that there actually hasn't been a really comprehensive one. There's some that have been made. There's Philippe Roget's film about the last recital, which also goes down many avenues, exploring the whole Besançon festival and so on and so forth. He left no stone unturned as well. But I think one about Lipatti that covers both his personal and professional life in general, for, you know, the non-Romanian public, because there are some that were done in Romania many years ago. I think it would be fascinating, and seeing these moving images in that context as well would be great. So let's vote.
Because there have been a Clara Haskell, so
that's right. There's one.
Why not?
One that was recently done. Absolutely.
Yeah, why not Dinu?
Absolutely. I mean, I think he is, like you said, you know, you growing up, hearing your teachers speak about him. It was the same thing for me when I first got into this historical lark. That, you know, whenever you mentioned Lipatti, there were these hushed tones and this sort of this reverential awe that accompanied his name.
Do you know, I was writing an article about Lipatti, and they asked me to get pianists to say something about him. So I gathered up some nice quotations about him, and I said to one pianist, I said, "Is there any kind of negative that you can say, you know, anything that you feel that has been improved over time?" And there was kind of an intake of breath from this extremely famous pianist, and he said, "I wouldn't dream of it. There's nothing I could possibly say to criticize him."
Yeah.
And that is a mixture partly of recognition of his extraordinary human achievement to play as he did, even regardless of the circumstances in which he was playing. But truly, it isn't better modern pianism. It's just different. It's very different now. but it's not better, and none of today's virtuosi will say that it's better now. They will agree it's different, but not better.
Yeah, and as much as there were many different kinds of pianism in the past, there are some who, some musicians will love this pianist of the past, other will not, because their playing could be much more individual. With Lipatti, there's this really unusual kind of individuality, which is still objective. And so it fits with our more modern aesthetic. And he is still such a role model to, what was so rare, what attracted me to him in the beginning was how many of his contemporaries spoke so highly of him, to a degree that's quite extraordinary, because it's quite rare that many people would agree that one artist was so extraordinary, because people have different tastes. And these were all artists of different tastes. And nowadays as well, and I've done the same as you, I've gotten quotes from pianists, I've quoted some, who are no longer with us, as well as the younger generation, and everybody still idolizes Lipatti.
When you hear it, it sounds, that word modernism that you said, it does sound so modern. It's so...
But it's timeless. And this is where he said this brilliant thing in this. He was due to teach a course with Nadia Boulanger the year after he died on interpretation. And just a few notes have survived. And he says that any music that is played after the era in which it was created actually was never bound or restricted by the conventions of the time. And in a sense, that's what we can appreciate with Lipatti's playing. It's just timeless. And so we can't imagine that he's playing it in 1950. He could have been playing in 1750. He could have been playing in 1850. I mean, it's just, and we still, over 70 years after his death, we're still listening to his music, and it still sounds fresh. It still sounds alive. It's absolutely extraordinary. And now being able to see him move, with this incredible footage that you've discovered, I think there's this whole other apprehension of him as a human being and not just as this mythical musician. He was really both.
I'm still looking for the missing pages of that essay, by the way.
So am I. I mean, we're all hopeful. And it's, again, what's incredible is the things that continue to come to light. And I'll just, again, anybody watching this video, if there is anything in the attic or so on, somebody just wrote to me last year from Switzerland, whose father had been a Lipatti fan and had exchanged some letters with him. And he just offered, he said, I've got the letters and newspaper clippings. I'm happy to send them to you. So,
there's a kind of network there. If anyone comes forward with something, it will be put into the bank of Lipatti.
That's it. So
I don't think we've got competing factions. No, we haven't got competing factions, have we?
No, I mean, and you were so gracious again when you started doing your research. You said, "Oh, I hope I'm not stepping on your toes." I was like, "My goodness, no. We need all the help we can get," and because we've all got our blind spots, and so there's been so much collaboration between us and with Gregore and Philippe Roger in France, and Monica and company in Romania, who've just been extraordinary with starting the new
Monica.
So
Monica has done so much. I hope Lipatti is looking down and thanking Monica.
He would be. So we're so grateful again, and all of the people on that team. We did the book launch on Zoom, because again our Romanian visit was scuttled due to COVID. So I'm just hopeful that there is going to be this continued recognition that it's not just his official discography, the big label stuff that's there, that there is much more to him, and that this should be more available, and that there will be more discoveries, because some of the things that came to light just in the last decade is still extraordinary, several decades after his death. So it is possible. And I'm glad that, again, the technology allows us to share in the way that we are. And I'm sure everybody's going to be very grateful to see the film that we're going to watch, that we're going to be showing in this upload shortly.
Well, happy watching, everyone.
Thanks so much, Orlando. Ursula Jones, thank you so much for agreeing to have this conversation. We're having this talk because Orlando Murrin, in researching Dinu Lipatti, found out about your family's relationship with the Lucerne Festival, where Dinu Lipatti actually played his last concert with orchestra. Could you, just for some background, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your family's history with the Lucerne Festival?
Yes, well, my father was one of the founder members of the Lucerne Festival, and so we always had artists in our home since the festival was started in 1938, and it was probably sort of in the latter years of the Second World War that we had more artists always coming to lunch or dinner, or sometimes to listen to concerts. We used to live at one stage, we lived just opposite the famous Lion Monument in Lucerne, which is a monument which is in memory of the Swiss soldiers who helped to rescue the King of France during the Revolution. And it's a dying lion, and there is a little pond in front, and Paul Sacher every year during the festival conducted his orchestra there and gave a serenade concert. Mostly it was Mozart and Haydn, but always new work. That's how I got to know Benjamin Britten later on, and Lutoslawski and many others. Anyway, we had a garden which looked down onto that from the other side, looked down onto the stage, and so you could hear the concerts, and we often had artists who didn't play on that particular day. They came and listened. And one day, Clara Haskell actually brought Dinu Lipatti. And I always remember that because it was an occasion when in the afternoon, Hindemith had improvised a little concert with 4 bassoons. And I think that's why Lipatti wanted to hear the 4 bassoons particularly.
Nice.
And so there he was. He was a very good-looking man, and he was there with, I don't know whether she was already his wife or whether she was to be his wife, his fiancée.
Mhm.
And I had no idea that when Orlando Murrin mentioned, he had heard from friends of mine that I had Dinu Lipatti on the film. And I had no idea that I was the only person in the world who had him live.
That's right.
Otherwise, there are only photographs together. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that's amazing is, in my 35 years of researching Lipatti, we never know what's going to show up in private hands. And quite often people are unaware of what it is that they have. So to backtrack then, your father enjoyed making little cinema, like short film snippets.
Yes,
Tell us about that.
Yeah, he always had a little camera, and he was a very impatient man. And later on, I always remembered he had Charlie Chaplin films, which I liked very much, and I didn't sort of realize in the early days that what an important thing he did to actually catch these moments, these unique moments.
Mhm.
And I have also, I don't know, you probably have seen that film, which was put together from a number of different things, because of course we had also family dinners and things like that. But amongst other things, we have Stokowski playing the Alphorn. I don't know whether you ever saw that one.
Yes.
On the water. And my father always asked artists whether they had any special wishes that they would like to see or hear in Lucerne. And I don't think he got that far with Dinu Lipatti. He was just there to listen to music, yes.
That's right. So your father, recorded these little films, and then it seems that it was just about 5 or 6 years ago, Orlando somehow found out that you had some couple of snippets of Dinu Lipatti at this garden party with Hindemith and all of these incredible luminaries, the musical elite in your garden.
Yes. Well, it's quite extraordinary because I looked at the film a couple of days ago before we were talking to each other, and I was reminded how many people, I mean, Furtwängler, for instance, always, well, he's very often stayed with us because my father was his lawyer. And I used to, in even earlier times, before we lived in that place with the garden, Furtwängler came and he slept in my bed, and I had to go and sleep on a deck chair when he came here.
Right.
And I don't know if you remember, he had a very long neck.
Yeah.
And so I had to prepare the bed for him. And mother said, Furti is coming, put the Keilkissen, which is the sort of mattress part for the head, the wrong way around, so that he could rest his neck and go down hill again.
Wow.
Anyway.
Amazing. And so on this occasion in 1947, there's this garden party. And this is the film that Orlando managed, was obviously very interested in, because this was Lipatti. 1947 was Lipatti's first time. He only played at Lucerne twice. He played in 47 with Hindemith, and he played in 1950 with Karajan. And so there's this garden party. And I mean, you met all of these people and you had many occasions, but do you remember this occasion specifically?
Yes, I remember it because of Hindemith, because Hindemith amazed me actually, because he could also play the bassoon, but he played the viola and I don't know how many other instruments. And, and there he had, I don't know whether he had written this, I can't remember. I only remember it was 4 bassoons, right. Which was quite extraordinary, yeah.
Indeed. Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that stands out is, with Lipatti, we've historically only seen the very posed and groomed studio photographs, or occasionally some private photographs, but nothing in movement. And there's this whole other demeanor that gets captured when you see him speaking with Hindemith and speaking with his wife. And in fact, I was a little surprised because there's a moment when they're listening to the bassoons and he leans over and he talks to Madeleine. And I thought, well, it's a little bit bad form to be talking during the performance, but there he was, and combing his hair. And it was just so natural to see him in this circumstance. And yet this film was just lying dormant in the collection. But the actual moving footage of these people in movement and in conversation, and to see, Maria Strader, who's like, so diminutive compared to,
I'm glad you noticed that, yes.
And Adrian Eschbacher, who's, towering.
Yeah, all those people. Well, I remember Maria Strader was singing in one of those concerts of Paul Sacher's, one of the serenade concerts, and she changed in my bedroom, and I had to help her, and then go down, because there were quite a few steps getting down to the stage.
Goodness, just amazing. So was this the only time that you remember Lipatti coming to the home, or do you recall seeing him at any other time?
Well, I can't remember actually. I must have been at his concert, but I don't remember really. I can't say I remember. I was going to look up on the programs. I have some programs, but not everything here.
Yeah.
That's difficult. I mean, you must know, anyone gets so many books, no more room.
I totally understand. So in 1947 he played the Mozart D minor concerto with Hindemith. And
Hindemith was conducting.
Hindemith was conducting, and apparently, I haven't seen it myself, but apparently there's a letter from Furtwängler or a note to Lipatti that says, "I wish I was conducting instead."
I don't remember that. I don't remember Hindemith ever conducting.
Oh no, he did. And there's a photo backstage of Lipatti with Enrico Mainardi and Hindemith. And they're all in their tails,
Well, of course, Enrico Mainardi, I remember very well. There was this trio,
with Fischer.
With Edwin Fischer. And was it Flesch, first of all, or was it Schneiderhan?
I think it was Schneiderhan.
Schneiderhan, yeah.
Might have been Flesch before, I'm not sure, but definitely there are recordings of the trio with Mainardi.
I think Mainardi is also on that film somewhere. My parents had a little summer house on the lake, and he was always a very good looking man, of course. And there was also, I think, in that there is also Milstein somewhere
Right.
on that film, and Stokowski, as I mentioned. Yeah.
As Stokowski, I remember where he's playing that. There's that horn, or
Yeah.
the traditional Swiss horn, right? So fortunately, thank goodness, the films were preserved. You have
I kept the guest books. I just put those. I hid those away.
Good. Good. I mean, these are invaluable. I mean, it's just, and it seems, sometimes we might imagine, and I think it happens for some collectors that, oh, well, I don't know that anybody will be interested in this, but I think you obviously you understood.
Oh yes, oh yes. I mean,
historical
I
value.
love showing them to my young artist friends, because I still help young musicians, talented musicians, and they come to Switzerland for little tours I organize, and sometimes we also, during the festival, more famous people, artists come. And I'm very lucky. I live in a flat of an interior decorator, which is really, it's like living in a castle. And so everybody always likes coming there. And then depending how the atmosphere goes, I said, would you be interested to have a look in the guest books?
Mm-hmm.
And they're always fascinated, everybody.
Of course.
And you probably know from Orlando, I made he photographed some pages.
Yeah. Absolutely amazing. I mean, I think the whole music world and piano world is going to be really excited to be able to see at last this incredible, just these few seconds of Lipatti. It does so much to us to humanize him. And to see him just as a human being who moved, not just as somebody static, not as somebody who we just hear, that every time we would see him, we would just see, these posed photographs and, very old and always the same face, but there's something different. There's this natural smile that comes out. There's the wave that his hair is actually a little bit, the only time we've ever seen his hair is a little bit, not completely greased back like mine is today. And where there's just that warmth that comes through, and I'm so
for me, of course, it's always Tears of Joy of Man's Desiring. I mean, he must have played that as an encore, I suppose.
Always.
I mean, I've never forgotten that. Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing. I mean, for sharing your memories here, but really also for allowing Orlando to revive and present this incredible film from your father's collection. And the Lipatti world. I mean, he has so many admirers still internationally. I went to Romania in 2016 and presented lectures, and I think that there's a lot of Romanians who still think, but why do you care about this Romanian pianist? They don't understand. No, he's an international. I mean, he's an international superstar. Still, 70 plus years after his death. I mean, he was an absolute legend, and his death in 1950 was such a loss. Well, Ursula, thank you so much for sharing your film, for sharing your memories, and I'm just so excited that we're able to share with the world, just these few seconds that were just magically captured by your father, and which so many decades later are just so invaluable.
Well, I was very lucky, to have to be with parents who enjoyed music.
Indeed.
Well, I hope you come one day to Lucerne while I'm still alive and see our old guest books. There are about 3 really good ones.
Definitely. Thank you so much again.
Not at all. Okay. Bye.